Over the last few months, I've been thinking a lot about our movement. And when I talk about the movement, I'm talking about the overall generic grouping of people that have been taken to the streets really since the 2016 referendum on a variety of issues. We're talking about people who've marched because of terrorist attacks. We're talking about people who have marched for free speech, people who've marched for Brexit, people who have marched in defence of veterans, people who've marched on veterans issues like PTSD, people who've marched on veterans issues like the Northern Ireland veterans and the malicious prosecution of men that served their country and protected the people of Northern Ireland from terrorists in the 70s, 80s and early 90s. So that overall grouping that we call the movement, made up of football fans, veterans, patriots, and anybody else who's concerned about what's happening in our country and what has been happening in our country. Where does that movement go and what does it do? Well, I think several things have to happen. This is just my personal opinion. First of all, I think we need to start expressing our opinions, not about what we're against all the time. Everybody knows now what we're against, but we need to start telling people what we're for. And I think it can be summed up very, very simply. We are for traditional British culture and British values. And we are proud to be British. Now, this is not being proud of the colour of our skin or our ethnic identity, because that's not what I'm talking about here. There can be people who are black who are proud to be British, people who are Chinese who are proud to be British, people who are Indian who are proud to be British, people who are Pakistani who are proud to be British. And we all know many of them. I have many good friends in our movement from those different backgrounds. So this is not an ethnic issue when I talk about being British. I'm talking about people who live in this country, are British citizens and are proud to be British citizens because they believe in the values of Britain. And not the limp-wristed, progressive values that Blair and Cameron and the cultural Marxists have been pushing upon us, because they're not British values at all. They are intolerant, hyper-liberal, progressive values that have done more harm to this country in the last 50 years than probably any other ideology. Now, I'm talking about traditional British values. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the ideas of fairness, the ideas of justice, the ideas of charity to your neighbour. And basically what those values are firmly grounded in Christianity. They're firmly grounded in the Bible. And if you go right the way through British history, from Roman times onwards, certainly since the 3rd century, there's been a very, very big Christian influence on this country. And I'm not talking about everybody becoming card-carrying, Bible-believing Christians, but what I'm saying is that the influence of Christianity on our nation has been phenomenal, and it has been deliberately airbrushed out of history by the cultural Marxists, by the national broadcaster, by people in government, by people in the academy, by the mainstream media. And what we need to do is press the reset button, and we need to get people back to those traditional Christian values of hard work, fair play, justice, charity, honesty, and integrity. Now, every single one of us fails in these areas all the time. So this isn't a question of people standing up and saying, I'm holier than thou, I'm better than you, I live a good, clean life, because the reality is there's not a single person in this country lives a good, clean life. There's not a single person on the planet lives a good, clean life. The Bible's very clear. We've all sinned and come short of the glory of God. So every single one of us falls short of that mark. But as a nation, when we aspire to live good, upright and moral lives, yes, we fail all the time, But when we aspire to do that, and we aspire to do right by our families, and we aspire to do right by our neighbours, and we aspire, as the New Testament says, to love our neighbours, then things can change in the country. And I would say to people, whether you're a religious person or not, why not get in touch with British culture and go to church? Go to church on Sunday. You can do what the heck you want the rest of the week, but why not just go to church on Sunday? And start thinking about what made Britain great. What made Britain great in the 19th century was the heritage of what happened in the 18th century. In the 18th century, Britain was on the verge of civil war, probably something similar to what would have happened in France. There was a invasion of Britain by the Scots, and Britain came very, very close to descending into absolute chaos. But something happened in the 18th century. Small number of men, John Wesley, Charles Wesley, George Whitefield, got filled with evangelical Christian zeal. And they went around the country and they went and preached to the working classes. And back then there was no TV, there was no internet, there was no distractions. And vast numbers of the British people were deeply affected by the ministry of John Wesley, Charles Wesley, George Whitefield, and numerous other Methodists who went around the country. They were very unpopular with the establishment. They were hated by the establishment. They were despised by the establishment, which seems a very familiar position for us. But they went around with a message of hope and the message of the gospel. And the whole moral climate of the UK was turned round because of a small group of men that took their religion seriously and took Christianity seriously. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what our movement should become, because there are plenty of people in our movement who are very, very good friends of mine who've done far more in terms of activism than I've ever done, and they're atheists or agnostics. So I'm not saying everybody has to become a card-carrying Christian, and I personally fail in so many areas of my life that I would not ever dream of trying to tell anybody else how to live. But what I'm saying is, the heritage of the United Kingdom is inextricably linked with the Christian faith. And when we look at things like Islamism, when we look at things like communism, and we say, how do we oppose these ideologies? Well, the best way to oppose these ideologies is with a better ideology. And that's where I believe getting in touch with our Christian heritage counts and matters. Now, if that's not for you, that's absolutely fine. I'm not trying to impose anything on anybody. But what I'm saying is, this is something that we've got to think about, because it's a huge part of our culture. It's a huge part of our history. It's been completely ignored. And again, many people in our movement will not be religious or will be of different religions. But what I'm asking is that we all look at the Christian heritage of the United Kingdom and ask a question: has it been a force for good or a force for bad? And I think we can safely say that when a number of people start taking Christianity very, very seriously and start taking the Bible very, very seriously and the commands of the Bible very, very seriously, when even a small number of people do that with absolute commitment, it changes the country. And that cannot be denied. History bears it out. When you look at the Reformation, you look at the Puritans, you look at Wycliffe, you look at the little Celtic monks that came across to Britain way, way, way back in, I think, the 6th or 7th century, and the impact that all those movements had on the history and the culture and the direction that Britain went in, then you can't deny that British culture and Christian culture are inextricably linked. And of course, the cultural Marxists, the establishment, the media elite, the intelligentsia pour scorn on such ideas because they detest them. They know it's true, but they deliberately hide that truth as much as possible from the vast majority of British people. So that's what my little thought for the day is today. Let's get an idea of what British culture is. Let's look at how closely it's connected with true Christianity. And let's see if, without becoming filled with evangelical zeal, let's see if we can re-establish some of that culture in the United Kingdom and change things. It's a positive message. You know, we can spend all our time attacking what's wrong with the country, but let's look at what was right with the country in the past and see if we can get back to that. I'll see you all soon.